the World Satsanga on the 12th of March 2016. Welcome everybody to today's, this evening's Satsanga, or this morning's Satsanga, depending upon where parts of the world you are. And I'm just going to very quickly go through the agenda for today, which is basically a very short discussion about why we're becoming more human. And then we've got a number of different questions from Ula and from Bill. So add in Ula. I think I lost a few people here for some strange reason. He's decided to throw a few people out. Okay, this is the joys of Skype. The joys of Skype. Good. Okay, I'm just pulling them back in again. Good. We've got people. Good. Excellent. And Adrian, one more. Okay, and add again. And we're just making sure that the people who fell off the system will pull back in again. Okay. Good. And I think we've got one more to add in. Good. Cool. Right, so I apologise for the system throwing people off. Okay, so I'll just very quickly go over the agenda again for those who suddenly found themselves disappearing into some different event space, of no doubt. Basically, we've just got the stabilisation of the system, and then followed by a quick talk about why we're becoming more human, and then we've got quite a few questions from Ula and from Bill as well. So I want to go through Bill's first because there's two questions there, and then we can go through Ula's for the rest of the session. And with luck, we should be able to finish about on time, or plus or minus 10 minutes, because I want to go through the meditation at the end, which is really about how to, how shall I say, use your consciousness to work upon some method of remote viewing. Some people call it astral travelling, but it's a different way of thinking about it. Remote viewing is a different way of thinking about it, because the consciousness stays within the body, but still is able to visualise or perceive the area that the consciousness is focused upon, so to speak. Okay, so very firstly then, why are we becoming more human? Well, I noticed, and I know that other people have noticed as well, that although we appear to be going up the frequencies, we're ascending the frequencies, that we go through the odd little ups and downs. And it's a little bit like going through a sawtooth profile, where the average continues to go up, but we do go up and down above that average. And around 2009, I've been told from my meditation, that we started to drop down from a peak down through the average back down to another low point. And the low point bottomed out a few months ago, perhaps 2 months ago maximum. And as a result of that, between that bottoming out point now and the point where we were getting close to this bottoming out point, we started to become more involved in human things, distracted by human things, becoming more intense about doing things that aren't really important, but they feel important. And of course, everything has its own level of importance, and it's our ability to prioritise this, which leads us into a position where we can understand how we can spend time giving ourselves opportunities to meditate versus doing a normal sort of human stuff. But what's really been happening is this downward shift has very slowly immersed us in a lower state of frequency, and most people, and that includes myself, have found themselves starting to focus more on human stuff than being involved in the normal everyday spiritual regime that we created for ourselves. And by that I mean that if you have let's say a regime where you would meditate 1 or 2 hours a day, in the morning or afternoon or evening or just before you go to bed, and you suddenly start to find that you're giving yourself little jobs to do, or maybe that TV program sounds a bit interesting, we'll watch that instead. Then we start to move ourselves out of this regular spiritual regime will be getting ourselves into a higher frequential state and communing with our higher selves or other entities or indeed source in favour of these more mundane things. And there's nothing wrong with with focusing on our human responsibilities. That's what we're here for. But it's very interesting how these things do sneak upon us. And I have noticed, particularly with myself and a few others who I know are very close to me, how we've been really, almost missed the fact that we've slowly moved down these frequencies and become more immersed in the incarnation of who and what we are. And it's very interesting how easy it happens as well, how quick it happens, because as we move down the frequencies, of course, the ego starts to take hold again, and the ego can very easily mislead us into thinking that we are spiritual, we're maintaining the same spiritual rigor that we had, same spiritual practices, same levels of dedication, devotion, and regularity in what we're doing. But in actual fact, we do miss the fact we are moving down. It's one of these things where we are so slowly removed from the higher frequential state that we're in to where we are right now, that we actually miss this downward trend. And there's a little story I'll try and use think of it like a good sushi chef. Okay, a good sushi chef will take a fish, and I'll sort of pray forgiveness here to the fishes. But a good sushi chef will take a fish and cook that fish while the fish is still alive, and the fish will still think it's alive, and although it probably has experienced some pain associated, it will still be alive. But on the other side of things, it's possible for a frog to go into a saucepan of water, and that water be room temperature, and the frog be quite happy. And if it's slowly heated up, the frog will not notice that it's becoming hotter and hotter and hotter, and it doesn't notice that it's getting cooked. And so we are the same thing. We are getting slowly cooked, but by going down the frequency, because we don't know it. I'm just going to give Marnie a quick text, because she's trying to come into the system and it's misbehaving. I'll just try to call her, but won't let her in. Okay. So this whole thing about things happening so slowly we miss them is very appropriate in terms of how we are fooled into thinking that we are still spiritual, but really we're dropping down the frequencies quite slowly. And that's very much a case of what's happening with us now. We're becoming more human because we are, in effect, going down the frequencies very slowly. So slow, in fact, that we don't realise, if we're with a frog in the saucepan of water, that we're being cooked slowly, until we're actually in the place where if we're a frog, we've been cooked. But in the case of us, we're in a lower state of immersion with the frequencies, and we actually may have forgotten most of what we were achieving. And so it is very easy to drop down the frequency. So we have to be careful what's going on around us and how we're reacting to certain things. And this includes how we get swept up in certain things. I mean, a good example, we talk about gossip as being one of the biggest ways, the fastest ways of gaining karma. But if we get pulled into certain things about people, personalities, environmental conditions, and we start finding ourselves arguing on the wrong side of the fence, so to speak, or we start to lose our patience with things, then that's one of the ways you can spot that you are in fact moving down the frequencies, and that movement down the frequencies hasn't been fast enough for you to notice it as being like a cliff edge drop, for instance. It's happened so slowly and so surreptitiously that it's almost like falling asleep very gently. You don't know you're falling asleep until you wake up later. And this is the same way. So what I would ask you all to do, and those who are listening into the Satsanga via the recording, is just do a check on yourself every now and then. Notice how you're behaving, how you're responding to others. Is it in the spiritual way? Are you being in a state of forgiveness all the time? Are you being in a state of argument all the time? You know, and look at these different sort of yin and yangs as to where you should be, where you are normally, compared to where you are now. And then sort of draw a line and say, okay, is this the spiritual me, or is this me becoming more human again, getting immersed back into the human sense, being involved with political thought processes, being involved with conjecture, being involved with argument or group mentalities. And these are things we have to look out for. And so, in essence, this whole thing about becoming more human is, as I've stated earlier, a function of us dropping down the frequencies slowly rather than quickly. Now, I say slowly because if it happened quickly, some of us would notice it very quickly as well. Now, if you think about the frog in the saucepan of water that was very, very slowly boiled, the frog was in the water, it liked the temperature of the water, so it stayed there. And as the water rose through the temperature slowly, the frog stayed there because he got used to the water rising in temperature slowly. And this is how things happen to us in terms of our ascension as well. But if we put the frog in the boiling water straight away, the frog would jump out straight away. We would like to think it would do. And that's the same thing with us, is that if we suddenly experience low frequency behavior, low frequency environments or low frequency thought processes, we move away from that. And that's what we do normally. If we move into an area, for instance, in our home cities, where it's known to have individuals who are low frequency, you can feel the energy is low, and you don't want to be in there, so you either walk out of that area or you drive out, depending upon your mode of transport. And that's the same thing with this cliff edge drop. We notice it, and so we move back out of it quite quickly. But when things happen slowly to us, very slowly, and the ego reinforces it, because obviously when we are lower frequency, the ego regains control of us, because the ego is a function of our near separation from our true energetic self, and therefore is created as a result of that part of it, that part of our true energetic self called the aspect or soul, being individualized within the human body and thinking of itself as a human body. It starts to reinforce this because it knows it's going to survive longer than it would have done had we remained in our spiritual upward turn. So the ego will also reinforce this drop in the frequencies as well. So we are becoming more human because we're dropping down the frequencies slightly. Now, we bottomed out about 2 months ago now, and so we've still got this movement along this lower frequency before we start to move back up again. And I'm being told that in sort of 6 months' time we'll start to notice ourselves going back up again. So just pay attention to yourselves. Again, look at how you are experiencing things, thinking, behaving, acting, in comparison to where you did about a year ago in terms of the relationship between your spiritual self and your human self, and try to make that turn point back up again earlier than it would be if it happened naturally. Okay, so it's just something I've picked up that we need to speak about, because it's not just me that's picked it up. It's other people who I know are spiritual as well. There's all you guys who are part of the Satsanga, and there's friends of mine who are sort of just slightly teetering around the edge of being spiritual versus not spiritual. And Chris is saying, is this where I hit the bottle again? And actually, yes, it's part of it, because when we start to think we can participate in low frequency behaviours, and that includes things like drinking copious amounts of alcohol or smoking weed or taking drugs and things, and getting away with it, that's when we're on the slippery slope. And it's one of the reasons why the gurus liked to keep their students very close to themselves. We've talked about gurus and why they kept their students very close to themselves, and why some of them slept very close to them as well. It's because they protected them from these little dips in frequency, to keep them higher frequencies, so that they would have a kickstart and a better chance of surviving the little dips in frequency and maintaining their own upward ascension through the frequencies and become more and more connected with Source. Okay, so that's the reason for that, why we're becoming more human. It's very much a case of personal observation. Please do observe yourselves and others. If others can cope with the help, the verbal help, then please offer them help in understanding that they've also been affected by this drop in the frequencies. But if they don't want it, then that's fine. Just let them be. They'll eventually come out to the other side themselves, but in their own time. But more importantly, work on yourselves, which is very important. Okay, so let me just. I think Marnie's just doing a quick question before we move on, because I want to get. Oh, okay. Marnie said, "Is this a cycle that we can be prepared for? It seems cyclic and frequency peaks and troughs." We can prepare for it, and the way to prepare for it is to keep a rigour in what we're doing in terms of our spiritual progression, in terms of our making sure that we do our meditations, making sure that we look after our bodies, that we eat correctly, we eat the right foods, we make sure we drink plenty of water, fresh water. This is spring water, not stuff from the tap. That we eat the correct foods, that we keep the right company, and we don't get drawn into arguments. It's all about looking after ourselves, and if we can continue to do this, then the little troughs don't affect us, but we benefit from the peaks. And so we have to understand that these peaks and troughs do happen, and sometimes they happen very quickly, so to speak, in terms of their frequency, and so, or should I say regularity, so we don't get confused with frequency. And sometimes they can be quite a distance in between each other. So it's just being aware that they do happen, and using these tools of recognising how we're thinking, behaving, and acting in comparison to where we were as more spiritual individuals, and then recognising any slips, any drops in our behaviour and thoughts and actions as being a way of saying, okay, we're moving down the frequencies. Let's protect ourselves. Let's do more meditating. Let's make sure that we read more spiritual texts, for instance, or we keep in contact with our better company, our spiritual friends. Okay, and I think right. So Marnie's saying, preparing ourselves versus looking at a map of future peaks and troughs. Yeah, that's right. Prepare yourself all the time. Recognise there's going to be troughs. Recognise there's going to be peaks. Making sure that you have a plan of action that allows you to cope with the troughs and benefit from the peaks. That's the most important thing. Okay, well that's brought that to a close. I think it's quite important that we do look at ourselves on a regular basis. Use something that Susan Tatenga called in the Undefended Self, the observer self, where we look at ourselves in a completely compassionate way, a completely divorced way, and we just recognise that we do move through different things ourselves. But don't blame ourselves, or don't give ourselves a hard time. Just respond to it in a very neutral way, and we'll come out the other side. Right, I think I've just got this question here from Bill. There's two questions from Bill, and then we'll move on to others' questions. Okay. So the first one is, within the physical universe, what are its boundaries? And if there's a boundary, what is on the other side? I.e., our minds can't grasp the idea of an infinite universe without an end. The boundary is based upon the frequential state. There's a location that is an energetic, we're going to call it a bubble, but it's not a bubble, or it's not even a sphere, although a sphere is a good way of describing it. But it's an area where a certain frequential set is dominant, and therefore its dominance allows an environmental condition to exist. that the physical universe needs 12 frequencies to create this. So this particular area, this universal area, is within the source. So our source has a set of energies with sentience assigned to it that is it in frequency, subdimensional component, full dimension, and zones. And those are part of the overall structure of the origin, because the origin created the source entities from its own energies. And so the physical universe operates within that set of energies, although it only occupies this area associated with the first 12 frequencies. And so, although it's part of the whole multiverse, which is about half, which occupies half of, or pretty much half of, the sentient area of energy that is the source, it only occupies 12 of those frequencies associated with the multiversal environment. And so the boundary is not so much from our perspective anything in terms of how wide is it, or how high it is, or how far forward we can go, or how far backward we can go. It's more aligned to the frequential levels you can get to. And so basically its boundary is frequency. And when we get to the end of the tolerance associated with the 12th frequency, we move into the 13th frequency, and then we go into another simultaneous universal condition, which is the second simultaneous universe, ours being the first. So it's not specifically to do with physical boundaries. It's more of a frequential boundary. And there's got another question here, so I'm just going to copy and put into the system. Okay. And it's a related question. Start again. Where or at what frequency does our source entity exist? And if we are a projection of our source entity, or at least our true energetic selves, then do we exist there as well? I.e., we're not a separation from, but are one with God. The source doesn't particularly exist at a specific frequency. It is part of a series of energies that have frequency, subdimensional components, full dimensions, and zones. And so it is within or part of, or should I say, an individualized part of the structure that is the origin. And that structure has sentience associated with it, and the energies that are part of that is what in our instance our source entity is. So if you think of it in terms of it's a smaller individualized version of the origin, and that it's not specifically at a certain frequency, it is part of its structure that's been individualized, and the energies associated with that structure being individualized, and that's the best way to think of it, rather than where does it exist, because it exists within what I'm told to call the polyomniscient sentient area of sentient self-awareness within the origin. It's part of its energies that are part of that, and so it is an individualized part of that. And our true energetic selves are a subset of that. Okay, we are a smaller version of the source. Our true energetic selves, our higher selves, God, heads over souls, are smaller versions of the source. And so we have a portion of its sentience and a portion of its energies that this sentience is assigned to, or are assigned to. And so we're not separate from God, and we're not separate from the source, and we're not separate from the origin. We're within the origin. We're part of this. We're part of the origin by being part of or individualized by the source, which was in turn individualized by the origin. So we are part of it. We are one within it, although we have an individualized function within it. Although we use the word individualized, it's not actually individuality per se. From our human perspective, it is a function of work that we do within that which is our creator, which also has a function of work which is within that which is its creator. So if we think of it in terms of let's think it down to the atomic level. If we think about the human body as being our creator, and then we go right down to the quark level as being what we are, then we have a function as a quark within the subatomic structure of an atom, which is a function within a larger body of energy we call a cell, for instance. And that cell's got a function within an organ, which has got a function within the gross physical aspect of our human form. And so we have a function as a quark, or even lower if you want to go 6 levels down to the Inu, that is specific and has a reason to be. Whereas higher up the scale, so does everything else. So does the subatomic level of the atom, so does the atom, so does the cell, so does the organ, so does the body. And then the energies above that, which are there to create the energies and the environment to allow the gross physical to exist. So, so what we have here is a stepping down function from that which created us to what we are now. And we are, if you like, we're the smallest parts of our creator, investigating the smallest parts of what our creator is. And that's what we're here for. And so, in essence, we're not separate with God, from God. We are God, but we're miniaturized functions of God, doing that which God wants us to do, or wants itself to do, which is to experience, learn, and evolve in very simplistic terms. So I hope that answers that question, Phil. And Marnie said, chapter 24 in the Origin speaks structure between the structures, a nice descriptor for this. In chapter 25, substructure of the Origin itself. Okay. Oh, thank you, Marnie, for that, and thanks, Bill, for asking the question. And in the book I'm currently working on, which is called The Curators, it goes into some more detail about the structure, the substructure as well, and the structure in between the structure. And without giving too much of a game away, the structure in between the structure is much larger, much larger than the structure that we work with to experience, learn, and evolve through. I'm not going to give the game away anymore, but it was hard work. It was hard work getting my head around that when I was working with it literally 2 or 3 weeks ago. But it's always fun. So that's about the curators and all the different things that the different entities are doing to help us, the small number of us, so to speak, experience, learn, and evolve. Right. Okay, so we can go to the next set of questions now that Ill has asked. Okay, which is good. Okay. Right. Oh, fantastic. Right. Before we start, though, there was a radio show I did a few weeks ago with Kevin Moore, and one of the things that we discussed was about gurus. And I'm going to make it a very quick, short and sharp and to the point comment. Is that we were talking about gurus and how some gurus wanted to hang on to their students and that they encourage their students to stay with them and be with them. And I said that I don't really want students to stay with me. I want them to grow on their own, to understand who and what they are, and move forwards and become their own person, become teachers in their own right. And there was a question about this. Do people get dependent upon their guru? And they do. I mean, people get dependent upon their teachers, their spouses, their friends, etc. But the dependency is not what I see with the people I work with here. People are independent. They've got their own things to do, their own thought processes. They come to share knowledge and ideas. They share questions, which are stimulating not only for the group but for me as well. And it opens up different environments to talk about. This is not a dependency. This is a sharing of thoughts and actions. The dependency comes when people say they can't move any further forwards without the guru being there for them, or the teacher being there for them, or they ask things like, what food should they eat today, for instance, or whether they should go out to the shops and buy some petrol for their car. Yeah, So there are individuals throughout the world who do this a lot, with every teacher. And what I try to do with the work I'm doing is create individual thought, because each of you is a teacher in your own rights. Each of you goes out there and talks to other people, shares your ideas, discuss your ideas, and you take on board their other people's ideas and you work with them to try and gain the bigger picture. This is entirely healthy. And the same with the traversing the frequencies. Once you've all been trained to level 3, you are in contact with Source. You can do whatever you want to do with that. You don't need me to be there to be able to be in contact with Source, because you've got your own links, and provided you keep meditating and you keep practicing, you're entirely independent and entirely able to create your own stronger links with Source, and provided if you practice really dedicatedly, then you may well do the same thing with the origin. And so again, it's all about giving you the freedom to express yourself spiritually with the teaching that you've got. And so when I, for instance, would say that I don't want people to become dependent, I don't see anybody I work with as being dependent. You're all independent, which is the beauty of it. Whereas there are, certainly within the Indian states, in the past, there's been this, and in the West as well. We've seen in the West as well. There are people who want to have people always around them, always telling them that they're good at this or they're good at that, and that's not healthy at all. It's not only necessary either in terms of protecting the individual students by keeping them inside their energies. We've moved beyond the need to work in an ashram and secrete ourselves away from the rest of humanity. We're able to move much faster with our own practice, staying with like-minded people, but being able to continuously do what we're doing on our own and moving ourselves forwards. And that's what I try to promote. I can give you the tools, I can make sure you use the tools okay, but then your own artwork is working with those tools and moving above and beyond them and becoming your own master and becoming your own teacher as well at the same time. Okay, so that was a little bit I wanted to explain that came out of the interview. That's on the website, by the way. If you look at the events and interviews, you'll find it's sort of right at the bottom of the radio interviews. It's down there. Okay. So first one, question. This I think ultimately came from the Kevin Moore interview. It says, we are ultimately responsible for everything that we do. When we start to disassociate ourselves from ownership, then we start to perpetuate the need to keep coming back to the incarnate state, to try and clear that level of dysfunctional thinking. So the question is, when we are clearing our karma as an incarnate being, how specific do we need to be? For example, if we're clearing dysfunctional thinking, is it enough to just own our thoughts, become the observer and change our thinking about the issue, and then behave in a higher acting way? Yes, although sometimes we need to have help in identifying what those dysfunctional thoughts are. When we trust, and get back to the teacher now, when we trust the individual who we bestow the authority to be our teacher, to the point where we can let them tell us what we're thinking wrong, and giving us the tool to move forward, then we can start working with those thoughts and being gentle with ourselves and recognising that we do sometimes have little slips, because the frequencies move up and down. We also think we've got it sorted, and we haven't. We have to be careful with how we do it. But we have to, if we own our own thoughts and become our own observer, then we can move forward in that way. And if we're clearing dysfunctional love karma, do we need to apply a force of love to negate it? Yes, of course. We should love everything, even those who wrong us. This was a big message that Jesus gave us. It's even those who wrong us. We must love everybody. Even those we think are doing hideous crimes, send them love. That lifts their frequencies. And at some point, if we send them enough love, they move out of that dysfunctional thought process and start to become fully functional and become good citizens. Okay. Third one, if we're clearing dysfunctional power karma, do we need a specific action to clear it? Yeah, be careful of the ego in this instance. Power is one of the most intoxicating methods of gaining karma. It affects status, thoughts, behaviours, actions, materialistic conditions and everything. Anything where we start to feel that we are very good about ourselves and feel that we're better than others is where the dysfunctional power karma comes into it. And so we have to be, again, very self-observant. More importantly, we really do need to trust somebody to tell us when we're going down this particular road. And it's very important to understand that the power karma is one that the ego uses very, very simply and very effectively. And the last part of this is that I wrote that thought is energy, love is a force, and power is energy. They're all energy, so what's the difference in clearing karma based on one of them? It's to do with how you get drawn into lower frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions. It's to do with how they lead you down the slippery slope of lower frequencies. Karma is all about the attraction to and the addiction to lower frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, desires, sensations, all those sorts of things. And so it is all about energy, but the thing is, it's all about how you work with those different roads of taking you down that karmic into that karmic function, as against how you define it energetically or frequentially. So thought is energy, but thought is a function of intention, which is a function of desire. So you can say that thought, although it's energy, is actually a function of ultimately desire. Whereas love is a force that's based upon the ultimate clarity of desire, and power is the correct application of intention, leading from desire and then thought. So it's all to do with the sentience behind it. And actually, the sentience behind it isn't an area where you can clear karma from. The sentience ultimately is a higher function of who and what we are. We are in fact sentience given a body of energy, or if we've commandeered a body of energy. But in essence, if we can use our sentience to define where our thoughts are going, our desires, our intentions are going, which create those thoughts, then we can start to move that and clear away. So try and think of it to a higher perspective if you want to. Try and look at the desire side, or above the thought, which is into the intention side, and use your intention to clear your karmic dysfunctional thought processes, or love, or power, and then you can sort of hit it before it gets down into the physical, so to speak. Okay. So the second question is, are our true energetic selves operating slightly differently in this multiversal cycle? Because it's the last one where they can use the physical universe to send aspects into the incarnate. A very high level answer is yes, and a slightly lower level answer to that yes is because it's the third evolutionary cycle that we're experiencing. The first two were a bit slower than this. We are moving, relatively speaking, quite quickly through the evolutionary cycle. We are moving quite quickly through the structure of the multiverse, and which of course leads us back into communion with Source. And so, in terms of how we're operating in a faster way. We seem to be getting through our problems faster, understanding ourselves faster, removing this dysfunctional thought process and power faster, and moving away from karma faster than we have done previously. And so it's getting to the point where we are going to be in a position where we're not going to need to incarnate again. Certainly within the next multiversal revolutionary cycle, but may even be within this particular cycle as well. And so another part of this is, are they putting more aspects into incarnate because it's now or never? I'm going to ask that question. So really, are more true energetic souls putting more aspects or souls into incarnate bodies because it's effectively, this is maybe the last sort of evolutionary cycle or multiversal cycle where we're going to be using this particular low level of frequency as an accelerant to our evolutionary progression. The answer is some of them are. I'm being told around 40% of the more experienced true energetic selves are projecting more of their aspects into the lower frequencies of the physical universe because it does help them. Those tend to be those true energetic selves whose aspects are also quite experienced in being here and don't tend to get caught up too deeply in the addictions in terms of the thoughts, behaviours and actions associated with low frequency existence, that which creates karma. And a lot of them, I'm being told, also have the ability to protect their aspects to some level, so they don't get stuck in the karmic loop or the karmic cycle. So there's a little bit of acceleration by those true energetic souls who are experienced in projecting themselves, parts of themselves into lower frequencies to accelerate their own evolution. And that was the yin side of the question. The yang is, or are less aspects being projected into the physical because they've been there and done that. You know, it's interesting because when I'm performing the readings I do, I'm starting to see more and more individuals who are very, very highly evolved. You know, in the fourth, fifth, and sixth full dimensions, mainly the fifth and upwards. And I'm starting to see that some of these are getting close to the end of their need to incarnate. So my feeling is, and the information I'm being given here is, as I'm speaking, is that these individuals have used various acceleration processes associated with incarnation and other methods of experiencing low frequencies that are allowing them to move up the frequencies faster and therefore evolve faster and therefore move out of the need to use the physical universe and therefore incarnation as a means of accelerating their own evolutionary progression. So there's a bit of both really in that respect, yes. Last part of this particular question is, do they put souls in more difficult situations, dipping into the lowest frequencies in this third cycle compared to our previous cycles? The answer to that is most definitely. And more importantly, aspects themselves are starting to choose difficult lives to experience to accelerate the evolution progression of their true energetic self. So it's not just the true energetic selves themselves, but it's also the aspects of them. That smaller part of the true energetic self's sentience is actually making the decision to experience more difficult lives to help in the acceleration of the evolutionary progression. So that's an interesting statement there, because in general, it's the true energetic self which projects the aspects of itself into a low frequency to allow itself to experience, learn and evolve. But having said that, this can be done in conjunction with an aspect, or the aspect can justify it itself if it's particularly experienced in a certain experience, in a certain type of environment, or experiential set, as it were, and it can decide to jump into different areas that it's got no experience of as well, to also accelerate its own evolutionary progression. So it's not just the true energetic self; it's the aspect as well in some instances. Okay. Okay. Excuse my coughing. I've got
A little bit of a bug at the moment, so I'm keeping going. Third question. I said that the entity called Jehovah. Oh, by the way, this was in a blog. There's one of 13 blogs, and I'm sort of spreading them out over the next sort of 6 to 7 weeks. By the way, about some references to certain biblical questions, and so this is where these questions come from. It says it states here that I said that the entity called Jehovah never incarnated because the frequencies were too low at the time of Moses. Okay, remember Moses is said to have channeled Jehovah, okay, and then received certain instructions. And I said that he would have been affected by the various functions of karma, but later the same true energetic self sent another aspect of itself that we know as Jesus, as a composite hybrid aspect. And this is true. The Jehovah aspect was used later in a fully incarnate state as Jesus, because the frequencies were higher. At the time of Moses, there was a really down. I'm being told it was a really downwards energetic spiral and frequential spiral. We were really right down in the bottom of the frequential levels, much lower than we are now. And any highly evolved true energetic self had to be very, very careful about projecting some part of itself into these particular low frequencies, because the karmic functions took hold really quickly, and therefore it took a long time for that particular entity to recover a particular aspect that had been projected into this low frequency aspect of the physical universe, specifically because of how fast it became immersed in the way of the human being in those days. Very, very fast, very, very quick karmic interaction there. The Jesus aspect actually ended up being a hybrid aspect of a number of different specialisms within that particular true energetic self, to enable it to cope with those lower frequencies, although they were higher than those when Jehovah was communicating with Moses, but also to give it the opportunity to have a certain level of frequential functionality, including methods of leadership and coercion as well, to help people move away from their levels of comfort and move into a different level of understanding. And the sub-question was not a bit wimpy of Jehovah, considering that the rest of us have been incarnating here for eons, regardless of the karmic consequences of our souls and true energetic selves. From a human perspective, you could think of it that way. But what I'm picking up is that the true energetic self that was working on the guidance of those individuals who were incarnate needed to keep itself in a higher frequential and purer state. So it's protection more than being scared or worried or yellow, so to speak. It was more about protecting itself so it could continue with being able to direct those individuals who are incarnate here on Earth. Okay, and using it as an evolutionary medium. Okay, let's have a look at the next question associated with that. It's all evolutionary content for our source and origin. Anyway, that's correct. It is all evolutionary content, and this is a very good comment there. Is that even if the aspect called Jehovah did incarnate on its own and not later as the character we call Jesus, and even if it had becoming addicted to the thoughts, behaviours, actions, and sensations associated with being in the lower frequencies of the multiverse, then it would have been an experience for that particular TES. But it just decided that's what it wanted to do. If we stand back a little bit and we look at some of the responses of the guide and helpers that I get when I'm talking to people about whether or not those particular guides have incarnated with them or materialised a body to check out in the communication lines between themselves as the guide and the person who's incarnated as being the person in the evolutionary cycle. The number of guides who say that they really respect those entities who enter into the evolutionary cycle is almost 100%. There's no guide who says, well, you know, that's their job. They all truly respect those individuals who enter into the incarnate cycle and expose themselves to lower frequency existence. And they all, apart from the odd rare one or two, say that they're not interested in going into the evolutionary cycle because it's so difficult to work with. Okay, the evolutionary opportunity is immense, but it's difficult to navigate, and they feel that they can do a better job by working within the maintenance of the structure of the multiverse, if that's what they're doing as part of the curators, or they stay as being guides or master guides or helpers for those entities who are part of the evolutionary cycle, who choose to use the lower frequencies as an evolutionary accelerant. So I mean, really, they're in awe. They're in awe of people like us who incarnate because they know how hard it is here. I mean, fancy being put in a position where you lose all of your senses totally. You know, we've only got 5 senses to lose, but think of the thousands we'd lose from going from being in the energetic state to where we are now. You know, this doesn't bear thinking about. And we'll only really fully understand it when we return back to the energetic, when our physical body's demise. So it's something to think about. That, you know, it's not really wimpy. It's probably common sense in actual fact. Okay, yeah, and right 4. Okay, as beings are you and Anne. This is my late wife. Each a whole soul aspect, and not just a composite hybrid like Jesus. Do you have any famous past lives that we recognise? I don't know of any famous past lives, to be honest. I know of a couple of lives where I've met a sticky end. I've been hung, drawn, and quartered. I've had somebody I've worked with turn against me. You know, those sorts of things. But the aspect that was Anne, who was still in communication with even now, by the way, is an aspect of my true energetic self, and therefore I'm an aspect of Anne's true energetic self, in my understanding. And so, in effect, we're the same TES, and which sort of made sense. And so, it seems that in this particular instance, that as a being of a different energy type, although we all have to behave and work with the same laws as everybody else when we reincarnate. There's no special treatment at all. That we are, as everybody else is. We're an aspect of a higher being, a much bigger being, which is our true energetic self, which in this instance was created by mistake, as against being created through intention. And famous past lives. Now, I've been hung, drawn, and quartered. I've been significantly let down, and I've lost whole groups of individuals as a result. I have to work back on that. You know, trying to recover the thoughts about being in a leadership position as a result of that. You know, there's betrayal. That was what happened there. Big one. Lots of energy power being used and lost and misinterpreted there. But there's nothing that you would recognise within sort of human historical contexts, because most of this happened, apart from being hung, drawn, and quartered, by the way, which happened in the I'm being told, 1400s or 15th century. Everything else was prehistory stuff, so it's a very long way away in time. And I'm not allowed to know most stuff, by the way, because it would distract me, of no doubt. I'm not even allowed to know my own future, although I do get glimpses of it. People say, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next year, what's going to happen the year after. And the answer is, well, we can know, but at the end of the day, it would only distract us and stops us from working in the now. If we know that we're going to have various levels of responsibility and various levels of things happening around us, and we look at that now compared to then, all we see is this huge cliff face that we've got to go through to get to that point. We miss out. There are lots of little jobs that happen to get us to that point, this little gradual curve that gets us up there. And so we end up sort of panicking. And so to spare us from the panicking of having to do all this work and being responsible for all these different things, we're allowed to do them slowly and without knowledge of the end product, so to speak. Although we may know the end product, we sort of keep it in the background, so it's not too much of a distraction. Okay, well I think that should answer that question. Let's have a quick look down here. I think we're okay. Let's see. Can't see anything else here. Marnie's asked a couple of questions. Yeah. Yes. Well, first question from Marnie is, and so does incarnating run the risk of dropping down the frequencies for our tests? Not so much dropping down the frequencies, but being stuck at a certain level. Okay, that's what happens there. Adrian says, if an aspect drops the frequencies, does it affect other aspects? No. Although again, it does stop the eventual the true entity itself communing faster. So the true entity itself doesn't drop down the frequencies; it just stays in a place until all these aspects come out the other side and remove karma. Okay. And then Marlon says, is it part of why it's so hard to incarnate in the physical and go through the evolutionary cycle have anything to do with the fractal integration of complexity that is compounded at this level from all of the higher levels of frequential evolution acting upon these lower levels? I'll say that again for people who go to listen to this. Is part of why it is so hard to incarnate in the physical and go through the evolutionary cycle have anything to do with the fractal integration of complexity that is compounded at this level from all of the high levels of frequential evolution acting upon the lower levels? That's the question, actually. The answer is it's to do with parallelism. It's so difficult here because we create so many different versions of ourselves as a result of it. I'm being told that around these lower frequencies, event space is more active because of the lack of understanding of our actions, our thoughts and our actions. And so, because we don't understand them, because we can't see them, because we're at lower level of frequency, we make a choice of one thing or another thing, or one choice out of 3 different options, or one choice out of 5 different options. And in making a choice out of those 5 different options, we actually create 5 different versions of ourselves. And so it's all to do with this inability to see the bigger picture totally. That means that it gets harder here because we have to work at it and actually work on the one issue. Whereas with a higher frequency, we can see the cause associated with our effects and vice versa. And we can see all of the different effects that create the cause, or all the different effects that are created by the cause. And so we start to understand things fast. So we don't make a decision as such. We understand the effects associated with that cause. So we experience everything concurrently. So in that respect, event space doesn't kick into place, so it becomes easier from that perspective because we experience things in a more complete and holistic sense, in a completely joined up but parallel way. Okay. Whereas down here we experience it in a linear way. And Ola says, do entities at frequency band 5 or higher see their event space options to explore? On being told 8 and 9, they start to see what's going on. They've got higher functionality obviously at level 4 and 5, and 6 and 7 up to 12. But it's to do with the higher functions and the higher frequencies within the physical universe, rather than sort of midpoints, they would start to see the, although it's incarnation still at levels 8 and 9 and 10, etc., and 12, for instance, it is nowhere near what difficult as it is here at these particular low levels, at the first 3 levels. And so they are able to see more of the effects associated with their actions, or the causes that create those effects, and never get around them, never get around them easily. So that's why a lot of aspects prefer to incarnate in the higher frequencies, because it's still classified as being incarnation, but it's much easier to navigate that incarnation because you can see what's happening in a more robust way. Whereas here we are very much deaf, dumb, and blind, and more. Okay. And thank you for your thanks, Marla. Okay. Well, looking like that's the end of the questions, and it's also looking like it's the end of the interaction from the questions. So what I want to do now is finish off with this meditation, which won't take an awful long time, but this is more of an exercise than an actual meditation. But I'd still like you to sit in your correct posture, which you prefer for meditation. The basic posture that is, or can be adapted for Western use, that's been taught by Hindus, is to sit in a straight-backed chair. Your feet flat on the ground and your palms facing uppermost, and your hands that are with the palms facing uppermost are placed at the interface of the upper thighs and the lower body. And close your eyes and then focus your closed eye vision on the origin of the third eye, which is in between the 2 eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. A little exercise at first is very local. Wherever you are now, your sentience or your focus is based upon being in your head. Okay? With your eyes focused, your closed eyes focused upon the origin of the third eye, then your focus is now on the origin of the third eye, on the surface of your forehead. This in effect does what you do when you are using your physical eyes. It allows you to look outside of your body as if you're in your body, which is where your aspect or your soul is. This local exercise first, what I'd like you to do now is just work on projecting your focus on not being inside your head or on the surface of your forehead or your third eyes, but I want you to look as if, or focus upon being in a different part of the room, looking at yourself. Now, clearly, remote viewing is a skill where you can go to some other part of the world, or rest of the physical universe, and observe a different environment or individuals who are in that environment, even if you've not been there before. But this is the start point. You lead up to that as a result of doing this and similar exercises. So imagine yourself standing against a wall or a doorway, or staring across the room, looking at yourself, meditating. Visualize in your mind's eye yourself sitting there in whatever posture you're using and meditating. You're not looking out of your eyes, you're not looking out of your third eye, you're looking directly at you. You are looking at you. Look at the trousers or the skirt you're wearing, the dress you're wearing, training shoes maybe, or ordinary shoes, shirt. Look at your haircut or the colour of your hair. Observe yourself as if you are somebody else in the room with you. And you are that other person. That's a very localized exercise, but it gives you the opportunity of placing your consciousness, or your sentience, if you want to use that word, in a different location, looking and sensing your own physical body. Now, although it may be difficult to position yourself in a different part of the room, it's easier because you're in the same place. It's a room that you know. You could even investigate the room that you're in with your eyes closed, and you're changing focus of your sentience, or your consciousness. You can look around bookshelves or walls or television screens or computer screens or chairs or carpets, tables, windows. Investigate the room. Not forgetting to look back and notice that your body is still sitting on the chair, or if you're sitting cross-legged on the ground or whatever. Whichever way you've left your body whilst you're doing this exercise, just always swing back and look at yourself. Walk around yourself. If you want to, you can visualize or use your intention to have hands and feel the contours of your own face, the ridges of your shoulders, the hair on your head, the ridges on your back where your spine comes through or shows through the skin. Okay. The trick is to visualize and see in your mind's eye you in this environment, as if you are somebody else looking at you. It's a very simple exercise. It's not part one of an exercise. You can practice this in your own time at home. You can spend lots of time doing this, just looking at yourself, projecting your consciousness to another part of the room and looking at yourself as if you're looking at a stranger, but it's you looking at you. Part two of this takes it a bit further, and so you can visualize in your mind's eye going somewhere else. It might be your office of work, it might be a friend's house, it might be a place that you love to walk or sit down. Visualize yourself in that location, looking around your friend's house, or your parents' house, or a sibling's house, or an environment that you particularly like to be in. Visualize yourself there, looking around this area, the picture of your environment being in your mind's eye. And don't forget, look around and seeing yourself there. So then it's like you're observing yourself as if you're somebody else. So then you see yourself in this new environment. You see yourself in your friend's house, in your sibling's house or your parents' house, or the favourite environment that you like to go into. You see yourself in there. So you're divorcing yourself, your sentience, your consciousness away from being in your human form, but being in the environments that you need to go to see, to view remotely. And more importantly, you divorce yourself from the effect of that remote viewingness being in a simulation of your own body. As we still think of ourselves as being in that body. So the function of turning around and looking at yourself in that environment is another way of assisting the decoupling of your consciousness with your human form and experiencing it as if you are completely detached. So again, wherever you are, look at the detail. What's on the floor, what's on the walls, what's in the distance, what's in the air, what's on the ceiling. If you're seeing yourself there, what do you look like? Do you have the same clothes? The same look? Or are you seeing a ball of energy? Just let your mind and your consciousness wander around this location of where you are. This is part 2. This is allowing yourself to move outside of your own environment, experience another environment that you know of, and also seeing yourself experiencing this other environment that you know of. Again, practice this. Either together with the first exercise or in isolation to the first exercise. Now I want you to visualize an area that you've not been to before. Is it a friend's house that you've never been to before, or some room that you've never seen in your friend's house? Is it a location on this planet that you've never been to, somewhere you'd like to go to? Is it a city? Is it a temple? Is it a school? Is it an environment, such as a field, or a factory, or a motorway, or freeway, or a dirt track, or a forest or a rainforest, or a desert, or a museum, or another important building? Allow yourself to project that part of you that you want to experience this into one of those environments. And again, you can detach yourself from yourself so you can see yourself in there. Like there's two of you. There's you and that body that is you. Don't try to focus on what's in the room or the environment that's around you. What's on the floor, what's above you, what's to the left of you, what's to the right of you, what's in front of you, what's behind you. Just let your spiritual or third eye do the work for you. Let it pick up the imagery or the knowingness, the perception, or the fully blown visualization of where you are and what you're experiencing. Allow yourself to be in this environment and looking around. Don't try to guess what's there. Just let what comes into your perceptual vision be your guide. When you start to pick up some form of imagery, don't try hard to see things. Just let it form in its own way. Don't try to control it yet. Just let it happen. When you practice this more and more, you can start to control the image more. Ask for more clarity, more detail. While you're doing this, if you wished, you could write a few notes down, or if you have a tape recorder or a digital recorder on your phone, or you've got a device which is specifically for digital recording, you can record what you're seeing as an audio file. You might want to pick in a place that is famous and just ask to go in there, look at the area, write down or speak about what you've experienced and what you've picked up, what you've seen, what you've perceived. And then later, when you've done it a number of times, you can actually look on the internet, for instance, to see whether the imagery you've got is accurate. Don't forget, you might find yourself in locations within the famous buildings that aren't on the internet. So don't worry if what you're receiving is not strictly in keeping with the images that are available on the internet, or any of the books, or any other media. Again, disfocus yourself from being behind your forehead. Move around as if you're detached. Allow yourself to look around and see yourself. So these are 3 exercises. One's within your own room location, one's within a known location, a friend or an acquaintance or an environment that you may work in, and one's in a completely remote location. In all 3 instances, you detach yourself by looking at yourself in these locations, giving your ability to detach your consciousness or your sentience from this particular form that you're using, your human body, and allowing your sentience or your consciousness to roam around unencumbered by the human form, experiencing the reality of the environment you're in from an energetic and remote perspective rather than human perspective. Okay. So with these 3 exercises given to you, you can practice them whenever you like. It'll be on the recording. It's a particularly effective exercise once you continue to do it on a regular basis. Okay. You can practice it if you wish just before going to bed or just after you've woken up in the morning. Just after you've woken up in the morning is a particularly good time to do it. Okay. Anyway. Okay, so let's think about coming back into our bodies anyway. So wherever you are, allow your consciousness to reside back in your human form, your physical form. Feel your body. At the start of the exercise, you may wish to feel your limbs, as an example, and feel your attention moving away from your toes and feet and legs fingers and hands and arms, and coming back in towards the centre of the body, and then withdrawing that sensory sensation from the centre of the body and going into the head, and then moving it out of the head into the projection of consciousness. You can do that at the start if you wish. I didn't mention it this time, but it's something you can use. But more importantly, when you do come back, it's time to feel your consciousness or your sentience reconnecting with your body. So feel your arms and your hands and your fingers. Feel your legs and your feet and your toes. Feel your body. Feel your head. Feel your lungs expanding and contracting, and your pulse as your blood moves around your body. And slowly come back into the room you're in. And if you've got some water there, take some water or tea or coffee or whatever. Take a drink of that to help ground you. And take your time to open your eyes after you've thought about that and work out where your water is, etc. And let's just check in and make sure we're all there. So Marley, are you back okay? Yeah, good. Okay, Joe, you back?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Ola?
Yes.
Good. Morello?
Yeah.
Good. Chris? Okay. Okay, Billy Allen's back as well. Good. John?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Bill? Good. Okay, I guess that Mo and Jeremy have just dropped off, I think, so I'm sure that they're okay. I'm just going to check them. Yes, they've got things to do. Okay, good. Well, thank you everybody for dialing in this month. Next month is going to be on the 23rd of April because I'm on a research tour in about a week's time. So it'll be the 23rd of April. I'll send you the invite straight away, and the recording will be available within the next half an hour as I'll put it onto the website for you to download it as you wish. And have a great morning or evening, everybody. And again, thank you very much for participating. It's always a delight to work with you. So, God's love to you all, and namaste.
Did you see the aliens in Crete?